Everyone left him, except her. The words echo quietly as rain taps against the glass of a nearly empty diner on the edge of the city, the kind of place where the neon sign flickers and the coffee is always a little too bitter. And tonight Ethan Carter sits alone in the far booth, his reflection staring back at him from the dark window. No suit tailored to perfection, no watch worth more than a car. Just a plain gray hoodie and tired eyes that no longer belong to the man who once owned half the skyline. And if you saw him now, you would never guess that just 72 hours ago he was standing at the top floor of a 40-story building, signing deals worth millions without even blinking. Because now all of that is gone. Or at least, that's what the world believes. And that's exactly how he wanted it. Because 3 nights ago in a private room overlooking Manhattan, Ethan leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled, listening as another woman across the table laughed a little too loudly at something that wasn't funny, her hand brushing his arm just long enough to linger, just long enough to make a point. And in that moment something inside him finally snapped. Not anger, not heartbreak, just clarity. The kind that comes when you realize you've been surrounded by people, but never actually seen. So he made a decision that would cost him everything. Or at least look like it would. And the next morning the headlines hit like a shockwave. Carter Holdings facing collapse. Tech billionaire Ethan Carter on the brink of bankruptcy. Numbers falling. Investors pulling out. Rumors spreading faster than facts. And just like that the calls stopped. The invitations disappeared. And the people who once filled his calendar suddenly had somewhere else to be. Because wealth had always been the gravity pulling them in. And without it, there was nothing left to keep them orbiting. And Ethan watched it happen in real time, sitting in silence as message after message turned from concern to distance, to nothing at all. And maybe that was the point. Maybe he needed to see it with his own eyes, needed to feel what it was like when the illusion finally cracked. But what he didn't expect, what he couldn't have planned, was her. Because across the diner, behind the counter where the light hums softly overhead, Lily Thompson wipes down a stack of chipped white plates, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, her movements quick but gentle, like she's used to working hard without anyone noticing. And she glances up just once, catching sight of him sitting there alone, soaked from the rain, looking like someone the world has already forgotten. And for a moment she hesitates, like she's deciding whether to get involved or just let another stranger fade into the background like so many before him. But then she grabs a mug, pours fresh coffee, and walks over, setting it down in front of him without asking, her voice soft but steady as she says, "You look like you could use something warm." And Ethan looks up, just slightly caught off guard, because no one has offered him anything without expecting something in return in a very long time. And right there, in that small, quiet moment, something shifts, something real, and neither of them knows yet that this simple act, this cup of coffee, this choice to stay, will change everything. The coffee is too hot at first, steam rising in thin curls between them, and Ethan wraps his hands around the mug more for the warmth than the taste, because it has been a long time since something as simple as this felt unfamiliar. And Lily does not rush away like most waitresses would when the place is nearly empty. Instead, she lingers just a second longer, studying him in that quiet, observant way that does not feel invasive, just attentive. And when he finally takes a sip, she nods, slightly as if confirming something to herself before asking, "Long night or long week?" And there is no edge in her voice, no hidden agenda, just a question that sounds like she actually cares about the answer. And Ethan hesitates, because the truth is complicated and the lie is easier. But for the first time in a long time, he is not sure which one he wants to give. So he settles somewhere in between and says something like that, his voice quieter than usual, stripped of the confidence that used to come so naturally. And Lily does not push. She just gives a small, understanding smile and gestures toward the booth across from him. "Mind if I sit for a minute? It is slow tonight." And he nods before he can think too much about it. And she slides into the seat, tucking one leg under slightly, her presence bringing a kind of warmth that has nothing to do with the coffee. And for a moment they sit in comfortable silence, the rain outside filling the space where conversation usually struggles to begin, until she speaks again. "You do not look like someone who belongs in a place like this." And Ethan almost laughs at that, because she has no idea how accurate that statement is, but not in the way she thinks. And he raises an eyebrow slightly. "And what kind of place do I belong in?" And Lily shrugs, glancing at his hands. The way he holds the mug like he is not used to it. The faint outline where an expensive watch used to sit on his wrist. Somewhere louder, probably. Somewhere with people trying to impress you. And the corner of his mouth lifts just a little, because she is closer to the truth than anyone has been since this started. And instead of denying it, he asks, "What makes you think I am that kind of guy?" And she leans back slightly, thoughtful. Because even when you look like you have nothing, you still sit like you are used to having everything. And that lands harder than he expects, not because it exposes him, but because it sees him, and for a second he forgets that this is all a test, that every interaction is supposed to be measured, observed, analyzed, but Lily is not analyzing him. She is just there, and when her stomach lets out a faint, involuntary growl, she laughs softly, a little embarrassed. "Sorry, skipped dinner." And without thinking, Ethan reaches into his pocket, then stops, because there is nothing there to offer. No card, no cash, just the reality of the role he chose to play. And before he can say anything, Lily waves it off, standing up and grabbing a menu. "Do not worry about it. I will bring something out. On the house." And he watches her walk back behind the counter, confused. In a way he cannot quite explain, because this is not how it is supposed to go. People are supposed to take when they sense weakness, not give. And when she returns with a simple plate of grilled cheese and fries, setting it down between them like it is the most normal thing in the world, he looks at her, genuinely puzzled. "Why are you doing this?" And she shrugs again, like the answer is obvious. "Because you look like you need it." And there it is, no expectation, no condition, just a quiet act of kindness that does not fit into any of the patterns he has spent years learning to read. And as he takes another sip of coffee, something inside him shifts again, deeper this time. Because for the first time since he started this experiment, he is no longer sure if he is the one testing the world, or if the world is quietly testing him back. The plate sits between them, simple and unpretentious, the kind of meal Ethan has not noticed in years. Yet now it feels strangely significant, and he picks up the sandwich slowly, almost like he is learning something new, while Lily leans her elbows lightly on the table, watching him with quiet curiosity, not in a way that demands anything, just present. And when he finally takes a bite, she smiles a little, like she has seen this moment before in different forms, people who come in carrying something heavy they cannot name. And for a few seconds neither of them speaks, the silence filled with the soft hum of the diner and the steady rhythm of rain against the glass, until Ethan sets the sandwich down and exhales, not dramatically, just enough to release a tension he did not realize he was holding. And Lily notices. Of course she does, tilting her head slightly as she asks, "So what happened?" And this time the question lands differently, not like an intrusion, but like an invitation, and Ethan considers brushing it off again, staying inside the safe distance of half-truths. But something about the way she sits there, completely unguarded, makes that feel unnecessary. So he says, "I lost my job." The word's simple, almost ordinary, yet carrying a weight he cannot fully explain, and Lily nods slowly, as if that makes perfect sense, as if it is not shocking or disappointing or something to judge, just a fact. "That happens," she says gently, and then adds with a small shrug, "More than people like to admit." And he watches her for a moment, trying to find the catch, the hidden reaction, but there is none, just quiet understanding, and he asks, "You do not think that says something about me?" And she lets out a soft breath, glancing around the diner before looking back at him. "It says something about what happened to you, not who you are." And that sentence lands deeper than anything he has heard in a long time, because most of his life people have defined him by what he had, not who he was. And now, stripped of all of it, she is doing the opposite, and he does not know how to process that. So instead he takes another bite, letting the moment settle, and Lily stands after a minute, brushing her hands on her apron. "I should get back before my manager thinks I disappeared," she says lightly. But before she walks away she pauses, reaching into her pocket and pulling out a small folded bill, setting it on the table next to his empty coffee cup, and Ethan frowns slightly. "What is that?" And she gives him a look like the answer should be obvious. "In case you need to get somewhere." And he stares at the $10 bill. The edge is worn, probably the last cash she has on her, and something in his chest tightens in a way he cannot ignore, because this is not generosity from abundance. This is kindness from scarcity, and that is something he has never truly understood until now. I cannot take that, he says quietly, pushing it back toward her, but Lily shakes her head, firm in a gentle way. You can, and you will pay it forward someday. And there is no room for argument in her tone, just belief. And before he can respond, she turns and walks back behind the counter, leaving him alone with the plate, the cooling coffee, and a $10 bill that suddenly feels heavier than any investment he has ever handled. And as he picks it up slowly, turning it between his fingers, Ethan realizes that this moment, this small, almost invisible exchange, is not part of his plan, not something he can measure or control, and for the first time since he started this test, he feels something unexpected creeping in beneath the surface of his careful observation. Something real, something dangerous, something that might change the outcome entirely. The bell above the diner door gives a soft chime as another gust of cold air slips inside. But Ethan barely notices as he sits there turning the $10 bill between his fingers, the paper worn and slightly creased. Nothing like the crisp stacks he used to handle without thinking. And yet this feels different, heavier, like it carries something money never did before. And across the room Lily moves easily between tables, refilling coffee, wiping counters, offering small smiles to strangers who barely look up. And for a moment he watches her, really watches her. The way she remembers who takes sugar and who does not. The way she listens even when people are not saying much. The way she gives without making it feel like a favor. And it confuses him more than anything else has in days, because none of this fits into the patterns he built his life on. And when she glances back toward him, catching his eyes for just a second, she gives a quick nod like she is checking if he is still okay. And he finds himself nodding back without thinking. Like there is some unspoken understanding forming between them, something simple and real. And when he finally stands to leave, pulling his hood up slightly as the rain outside has not let up, he hesitates for a fraction of a second before placing the empty plate neatly at the edge of the table, the way someone who respects a place would do, not someone who owns half the city. And he leaves the $10 bill on the table, pushing it back toward where Lily had set it, like returning something he does not deserve to keep. But as he reaches the door, the bell chiming softly again, her voice calls out from behind him, "Hey." And he turns, a little surprised, as she walks over, drying her hands on a towel, her expression calm but firm in that quiet way of hers. "You forgot something," she says, picking up the bill and holding it out to him. And Ethan shakes his head slightly. "I cannot take it," he replies, but Lily steps closer, placing it directly into his hand and closing his fingers around it before he can protest again, her voice softer now but unwavering. "It is not about what you can or cannot take. It is about what you need right now." And for a second he looks at her, really looks at her, trying to understand how someone who has so little can speak with that kind of certainty, that kind of strength, and she adds, almost as an afterthought, "Just promise you will use it for something that helps." And there is no judgment in her tone, just belief, and something in him shifts again, deeper this time, because no one has trusted him like this without knowing who he is in years, and he nods slowly, slipping the bill into his pocket, not as money, but as something else entirely, something he cannot quite define yet. And when he steps outside, the cold rain hitting his face, it feels sharper somehow, clearer, like the world has changed in a way he did not expect. And as he walks down the empty street, hands tucked into his jacket, he pulls the bill out once more, glancing at it under the dim street light. And for the first time since this experiment began, Ethan Carter is no longer thinking about what people lose when the money disappears. He is thinking about what remains, and that thought follows him all the way down the block, lingering quietly as the city moves on around him, unaware that something small and almost invisible has just begun to change everything. The rain has slowed by the time Ethan reaches the end of the block, fading into a light drizzle that barely touches the pavement. But he keeps walking anyway, not because he has somewhere to be, but because for the first time in a long time, he does not feel the need to rush toward anything. And the $10 bill rests in his pocket, folded carefully like something fragile, something that should not be spent without meaning. And as he passes closed storefronts and dim streetlights, his phone vibrates faintly, the screen lighting up with a name he knows too well, Marcus Hale, his closest advisor, the only person who knows the truth behind everything. And Ethan stares at it for a moment before answering. lifting it to his ear without breaking his stride. "Tell me you are still alive," Marcus says immediately, his tone half serious, half irritated. "Because the board is losing its mind and the media is already planning your obituary." And Ethan lets out a quiet breath, glancing up at the skyline barely visible through the clouds. "Good. That means it is working," he replies calmly, and there is a pause on the other end, the kind that carries a dozen unspoken concerns. "Working?" Marcus repeats, lowering his voice. "You call disappearing, destroying your public image, and letting vultures circle your company working?" And Ethan stops walking for a second, leaning against a cold brick wall as he looks down at the wet pavement, his reflection distorted in the puddles. "I needed to see it," he says simply, and Marcus exhales sharply. "And what have you seen so far?" And Ethan does not answer right away, because the truth is not what he expected, not something he can summarize in numbers or outcomes. So instead he reaches into his pocket, pulling out the $10 bill and smoothing it between his fingers. "I have seen what people do when they think you have nothing left," he finally says, his voice quieter now, more grounded, and Marcus scoffs lightly. "We already knew that, Ethan. People leave." And there is a certainty in his tone, the kind built on years of watching the same patterns repeat. But Ethan shakes his head slightly, even though Marcus cannot see it. "Not all of them," he replies, and that catches Marcus off guard. "What do you mean, not all of them?" he asks, and Ethan hesitates for just a second before answering. "There is someone," and the words feel strange coming out, unfamiliar, because he has never framed a person that way before, not in this context, not without strategy behind it. And Marcus lets out a low breath, already reading into it. "Ethan, do not tell me you are getting emotionally involved in the middle of this." And there is a warning there, subtle but clear, but Ethan looks back toward the direction of the diner, the faint glow of its sign barely visible in the distance, and something in his chest tightens again, not uncomfortably, just real. "She does not know who I am," he says instead, deflecting slightly, and Marcus responds immediately. That is the point of the test. But Ethan closes his eyes for a brief moment, remembering the way Lily had placed the money in his hand without hesitation, without calculation. "That is not what I mean," he says quietly, and there is another pause, longer this time, heavier, until Marcus finally speaks again, more carefully now. "Then what do you mean?" And Ethan opens his eyes, looking down at the bill once more, the edges worn from use, the value small but the meaning undeniable. "I mean, she does not care," he says, and the words settle between them. Simple, but impossible to ignore, because for the first time since this began, Ethan Carter is no longer just observing the outcome of his experiment. He is starting to feel it, and as the call ends and the city hums softly around him, he slips the bill back into his pocket, not as a tool, not as part of the plan, but as a reminder that something unexpected has entered the equation, something that might not follow the rules he created, and for the first time, that uncertainty does not feel like a risk. It feels like the beginning of something he cannot control. The next morning arrives quieter than Ethan expects, the city already moving at its usual relentless pace while he stands on the sidewalk across from the diner, hands tucked into his jacket, watching through the glass as Lily moves inside, the early light catching in her hair as she flips the sign from closed to open. And for a moment, he just stays there, not stepping in, not rushing forward, because this is unfamiliar territory, not a boardroom, not a negotiation, just a simple decision that somehow feels more complicated than any deal he has ever made. And when he finally pushes the door open, the small bell announces his presence again, and Lily looks up almost immediately, surprise flickering across her face before settling into a small, genuine smile. "You came back," she says, like it matters more than it should, and Ethan nods slightly, stepping inside as the warmth wraps around him. "I said I would use it for something that helps," he replies, pulling the $10 bill from his pocket and placing it gently on the counter, not to return it, but to pay for something, anything. And Lily glances at it before looking back at him, her eyes soft but curious. "So what are you getting?" And he hesitates, because he is not here for the food, not really, but he says, "Breakfast," and she nods, already reaching for a plate, moving with the same quiet efficiency as the night before. And this time he watches more closely, noticing the small things he missed. The way she checks the clock instinctively, The way she hums under her breath when she thinks no one is listening. The way she handles each task like it matters, even when no one is watching. And when she sets a plate of eggs and toast in front of him, sliding the bill back toward him instead of taking it. He looks up, confused again. "I thought you said to use it," he says, and Lily leans lightly against the counter, folding her arms. "I did, but not on something you could get anyway," she replies, and he frowns slightly. "What does that mean?" And she smiles just a little, like she is letting him in on something simple but important. "It means if $10 is all you have, then you should keep it until you really need it." And there is no lecture in her voice, no pity, just practical kindness, the kind that comes from someone who has lived that reality. And Ethan looks down at the bill again, realizing she is not trying to help him by taking it. She is trying to help him by making sure he does not lose it. And that realization shifts something inside him again, deeper, quieter, and he asks, almost without thinking, "Then why give it to me in the first place?" And Lily shrugs, reaching for a coffee pot. "Because last night, you needed to know someone would," she says simply, pouring him a fresh cup before moving on to another task, leaving him sitting there with a plate of food he did not really come for, and a $10 bill that now feels less like money and more like a test he did not create. And as he eats slowly, taking in the steady rhythm of the diner waking up around him, Ethan begins to understand that this is not just about who stays when everything falls apart. It is about who gives when there is no reason to. And for the first time since this began, he is not thinking about the end of the experiment. He is thinking about what happens if he does not want it to end at all. The morning stretches into late afternoon before Ethan realizes how long he has been sitting there, not just physically in the diner, but mentally somewhere else entirely, watching Lily move through her shift with the same quiet consistency, the same steady kindness that does not change whether the place is empty or full. And at some point he finds himself helping without being asked, clearing a table, stacking a few plates awkwardly like someone who has never done it before, and Lily notices. Immediately, pausing mid-step with a small amused smile. "You do not have to do that," she says, but there is no disapproval in her voice, just curiosity, and Ethan shrugs lightly, placing the plates down near the counter. "Maybe I want to," he replies, and she studies him for a second, like she is trying to understand what is driving that choice, before nodding slowly. "All right, then do not break anything," she says with a hint of humor, and something about that moment feels strangely normal. Like this is not a test, not an act, just two people sharing space in a way that does not require explanation. And as the hours pass, the diner fills and empties again, conversations blending into background noise. Ethan begins to see things he never paid attention to before, the way a regular customer leaves exact change every time, the way Lily quietly adds an extra slice of toast for someone who looks like they might need it, the way she never makes it obvious when she is helping, and it unsettles him in a way he cannot fully explain, because it forces him to question something deeper than just other people. It forces him to question himself. And when the rush finally slows down and the late afternoon light filters through the windows, soft and golden, Lily leans against the counter again, catching her breath. "You stayed all day," she says, almost surprised, and Ethan glances around like he has just realized it too. "I guess I did," he answers, and she tilts her head slightly. Most people would have left hours ago. And there is something in that sentence, something that lingers, and Ethan looks at her, really looks this time, and asks, "Why did you not?" And Lily pauses, the question catching her off guard for just a second before she looks down at her hands, then back at him. "Because leaving is easy," she says quietly. "Staying is the part that tells you who you are." And the words settle between them. Simple, but undeniable. And Ethan feels that same shift again. Deeper now, heavier, because he knows exactly what she means. He has seen it play out over and over again these past few days. People choosing the easy way out, choosing distance, choosing comfort. And yet here she is, choosing something else entirely without even thinking about it. And before he can stop himself, he asks, "And what if staying hurts?" And Lily lets out a small breath, her expression softening just a little. "Then at least you know it mattered," she replies. And that answer lingers longer than anything else she has said, because it does not just apply to her, it applies to him, to everything he has built this experiment on. And for the first time, The lines between the test and reality begin to blur in a way he cannot control, and as the sun dips lower outside, casting long shadows across the diner floor, Ethan Carter begins to realize that this is no longer about proving a point. It is about facing something he has avoided for years, and that realization does not come with fear. It comes with a quiet, undeniable truth that he can no longer ignore. The evening settles in slowly, the sky outside fading into a deep shade of blue as the last few customers drift out of the diner, leaving behind quiet tables and the soft hum of overhead lights, and Ethan remains seated near the counter, his presence no longer out of place, but not entirely understood either, like he has become part of the rhythm without fully belonging to it. And Lily moves through her closing routine with the same calm focus, stacking chairs, wiping surfaces, turning ordinary actions into something steady and grounding. And for a moment, everything feels simple, almost too simple, until the bell above the door rings sharply, cutting through the calm, and two men in tailored coats step inside, their polished shoes and sharp expressions immediately out of sync with the warmth of the diner, and Ethan's body stiffens before his mind catches up, because he recognizes them instantly, not as strangers, but as part of a world he has deliberately stepped away from. And one of them scans the room before, locking eyes with him, relief flashing across his face as he walks forward. "Mr. Carter, we have been trying to reach you for days," he says, his voice controlled but urgent, and the sound of that name in this place feels wrong, too loud, too real, and Lily pauses mid-motion behind the counter, her hand still holding a damp cloth as she looks between them, confusion settling in, and Ethan stands slowly, every instinct telling him to shut this down, to keep the boundary intact, but it is already slipping, already breaking, and the second man steps closer, lowering his voice but not enough. "The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning. You cannot keep this going." And Lily's eyes flick back to Ethan, searching, questioning, and he feels it, the shift in the air, the fragile trust that has been building now hanging in uncertainty. And for a brief second, he considers lying again, continuing the role. But something in him refuses, something that has changed without his permission. And he exhales quietly, running a hand through his hair before saying, "I know," his voice steady but no longer hidden, and that is enough, more than enough, because Lily's expression changes, not dramatically, not with anger or shock, but with something quieter, something deeper, a realization forming piece by piece, and she sets the cloth down slowly, stepping out from behind the counter. "Carter," she repeats softly, like testing the word, and Ethan meets her eyes, knowing there is no way to take it back now, no way to return to what it was, and he nods once, the smallest acknowledgement that carries everything, and the silence that follows feels heavier than anything that has come before. Because this is not just a reveal of wealth or status, it is the collapse of something real, something that existed only because it was unseen, and Lily looks at him for a long moment, not speaking, not reacting the way he has seen countless others react to his name, but simply processing, and that somehow feels worse, because it means this mattered, and when she finally speaks, her voice is calm but different now, quieter in a way that carries weight. "So you were never really struggling," she says, not as an accusation, but as a fact she is trying to understand, and Ethan steps forward slightly, shaking his head. "Not the way you think," he answers, but the words feel insufficient even as he says them, and Lily lets out a slow breath, her gaze dropping briefly before returning to him. "You tested people," she says, and this time there is no question in it, just clarity, and Ethan does not deny it, cannot deny it, and that truth settles between them like a line that cannot be crossed back over. And for the first time since this began, Ethan Carter feels something he did not plan for, not control, not measure, something raw and undeniable, the realization that in trying to uncover what is real, he may have just broken the one thing that actually was. The silence stretches longer than either of them expects, the kind that does not rush to be filled, because some truths need space to settle, and Ethan stands there, no longer the man in control of the situation, no longer the one observing from a distance, just a man who has made a choice and now has to face what it costs. And Lily does not move right away, her eyes still on him, not searching for answers anymore, but measuring something deeper, something quieter, and when she finally exhales, It is not with anger, not even disappointment in the way he anticipated, but with a kind of clarity that feels heavier than both. "You could have just asked," she says softly, and those words land harder than any accusation, because they strip everything down to something painfully simple. And Ethan takes a small step closer, his voice lower now, more honest than it has been since the moment he walked into this place. "I did not think anyone would answer truthfully," he admits, and Lily nods slightly, like she understands the logic even if she does not agree with it. "So you decided to create a lie instead," she replies, and there is no bitterness in her tone, just truth, and Ethan does not deny it, cannot deny it, because that is exactly what he did, and for a moment neither of them speaks again, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between them, until Lily glances down briefly, then back up at him, her expression soft but firm. "Do you know what the problem is?" she asks, and Ethan shakes his head slowly, because for once he is not trying to predict the answer, he is waiting for it, and Lily takes a small step forward, closing the distance just enough to make sure he hears her clearly. "You were so busy testing whether people would stay that you never gave them a real reason to, and that lands deeper than anything else has, because it reframes everything, not as a failure of others, but as something incomplete in him." And Ethan looks at her, really looks at her, the way he should have from the beginning, and says quietly, "You stayed." And Lily lets out a small breath, a faint, almost sad smile touching her lips. "I stayed because I thought it was real," she answers, and there it is, the truth he cannot escape. The reason this moment feels different from every other outcome he has observed, because this one matters. And for the first time, Ethan does not try to fix it with logic or control. He reaches into his pocket instead, pulling out the $10 bill and holding it between them. The edge is worn, the meaning now undeniable. "This was real," he says, his voice steady but unguarded. "You did not know who I was. You did not need to. You just gave." And Lily looks at the bill, then back at him, her eyes softening just slightly, because she recognizes it, not as money, but as a moment. And Ethan continues, not rushing, not trying to convince, just speaking honestly. "I cannot undo what I did, and I cannot pretend this started the right way, but what I feel now, that is not part of the test." And the words hang there, simple and unpolished, but real in a way he has not allowed himself to be before. And Lily studies him for a long moment, weighing something only she can define, before finally stepping closer and gently pushing the bill back toward him, her voice quiet but certain. "Then stop testing," she says, and Ethan's breath catches slightly, not because the answer is complicated, but because it is that simple.